Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming. Good to see you. Happy early May. And welcome to our talk on the impact of nearshoring movement on tech. We are really excited to have this conversation with you. I've got an esteemed panel that I can't wait to introduce to you. But first, a little introduction on myself. I'm Neal Bloom. I am an investor with Interlock Capital. We're an investment community that, together as a group of operators and exited founders, put our brains together and invest in the hard things, both software and hardware. And so we've got investors all over the world as part of us, but we're rooted here in San Diego. And we've been investing over the course of about 4 to 5 years, which over the last few years, I think we've seen some changes globally that have affected us locally. And that's kind of what we're going to set the precipice for tonight. There's a lot going on in the world that affects our everyday. Whether it's supply chain upheaval, whether it's global conflict, whether it's a change of materials because of sustainability or lack of access to, or our talent that just wants to work in other places at different times than what we're used to. That sets the stage for a lot of different ways of doing business. Fortunately enough, it's actually brought San Diego at an amazing point to work on both sides of the border. And so for years, we've been talking about a mega region here down in San Diego and Tijuana. And today we're going to show how well it's really working. Things are really happening from an entire region that just happens to have two different countries on either side. And we're going to talk about that in a global way as well too. How are companies working globally in different time zones, but also hyper-locally as well too. So without further ado, I'd love to turn it over to our panel so we can start this discussion. First, we'll go with Ernesto Bravo from Tecma West. Please.
Hi everyone, my name is Ernesto Bravo. I'm president of Tecma West. That's a division in Baja California basically, and what we do is we help companies set up factories in Mexico, and we've been doing that for almost 40 years. I personally was born in San Diego, grew up in Tijuana, finished grammar school there, transferred to high school in San Diego, so I'm very much cross-cultural. I don't know if Spanish or English is my first language, but actually it's Spanish, but I've been told you can't tell. In any case, so really grew up in the bicultural world, and I've been now in the business of manufacturing for almost 13 years. And Tecma, as a company, we have well over 10,000 employees across Mexico. With about 80 different factories. About half of those are here in Tijuana, and that's my area. So I'm looking forward to this discussion. And thank you, Neal. Thank you, SEACOMP and Mike for hosting this.
Thank you very much. Next, we have Gabrielle Griffith, Director at BPE Global.
Hi, everyone. I'm Gabrielle Griffith, Gabby Griffith from BPE Global. BPE Global is a 20-year-old global trade compliance consulting firm. So we work with companies across all sectors, lots of high tech, and that's what I'm here to talk about tonight. There's a lot of considerations to think about and the expansion of a global cross-border industry and the tangible elements and intangible elements. And I myself come from industry in the high-tech sector as well as a variety of other government sectors. So I've kind of been on both sides of the house, and I'm thrilled to be here and contribute my perspective to this conversation. So thank you for having me. Thank you, SEACOMP. Thanks, Terry, for inviting me.
Next, Angel Sanchez, co-founder of ArkusNexus.
Thank you, Neal. Well, my name is Angel Sanchez. I'm one of the co-founders of ArkusNexus, a nearshore software development company, basically building great software technology for companies in the US, but built by mostly Mexicans, because now we have expanded into South America. And we're proud to say that we have Colombians, Chileans, and we are still waiting for people from Uruguay, Argentina, and Brazil to join forces and to bring and prove that we can deliver what this great industry ecosystem and country requests from us. And I'm happy to see a lot of familiar faces. We have been building community here in San Diego all the way to LA for like 12 years. When we figured out that this is our backyard where we need to prove that we can deliver, we start bringing this type of community. So happy to see a lot of familiar faces, and also to say hola and gusto en verte, because most of you speak Spanish, at least to understand what we're trying to say, to build strong bonding. So that's what we have been doing for 21 years now.
Amazing. Last but not least, Terry Arbaugh, Chief Commercial Officer of SEACOMP.
Yep, thank you. Terry Arbaugh with SEACOMP. We are an electronics manufacturing services provider. We're headquartered in Carlsbad. We have a factory in Dongguan, China, and our grand opening of our Tijuana, Mexico facility is tomorrow.
Yeah.
When I was inviting the panel to be here today, I said, hey, this new trend, this nearshoring thing we want to talk about, Angel's like, where have you been? In here for 20 years. So we design and manufacture industrial, medical, and consumer electronics. Right, so really happy to be here. We talk about nearshoring now, having a factory in China and opening up a factory in Mexico. In this last couple of years, going through this process, we talk about nearshoring a lot. So there's a lot to discuss, and wanted to make sure we had a breadth of perspectives here to do so. So thank you all for being here, and Neal and panelists, thank you guys so much.
Well, thank you. And we're going to talk for about 30, 40 minutes and then open up for questions. Very conversational here, but let's hold our questions till the end. But let's set the stage. I know you came to an event called about nearshoring, but Gabby, can you just take us through, give us some basic guidance on what nearshoring is in kind of a cross-sector meaning?
Sure, yeah. So obviously the panel topic is nearshoring, but I'm sure everyone in this room has heard of, there's nearshoring, there's reshoring, there's friendshoring, there's onshoring, there's a lot of various versions and iterations of shoring. They're all just buzzwords for basically strategic supply chain. And I would say specifically if we're really in the weeds on nearshoring, at least as it pertains versus reshoring, which would be the most familiar buzzwords. Reshoring is when you bring what is a manufacturing operation overseas back on shore. So it's bringing manufacturing production home onto our domestic shores. Nearshoring is where you bring overseas operations to neighboring countries for whether it's strategy on your supply chain, more control and visibility over the folks that are developing and producing your goods. Friendshoring is more of a geopolitical strategy to transition manufacturing operations from what would be considered a riskier hot button country into lesser hot button countries. So an example would be moving software manufacturing from China into India. So not exactly a near shore, but a friendlier shore. But specifically for today, we're talking about nearshoring. So the value and the considerations of bringing overseas operations into our neighboring countries, our neighboring shores, specifically Mexico. So hopefully that sets the stage.
If there's one thing we can take away from tonight is to use friendshoring more often, because it's exactly what it is. Yeah. And I think you'll get that from this audience and this panel right here as well too. Terry, specifically from the hardware and electronics world, what does nearshoring, friendshoring mean in your world?
Yeah, for us, it's actually amazing. So like I mentioned, we've had a factory in Dongguan, China for more than 10 years. Mike, the CEO of our company, actually lived in Hong Kong for 10 years. And so whenever we had to go to the factory to work with our team, whenever one of our customers or prospects wanted to see manufacturing or meet the team, it's a big commitment, right? Time, money to get all the way over there. We're 45 minutes away from our factory right now, right? So there's a massive difference. We've been able to, as we've gone through this process, I can drop off my daughter at school in the morning, get down to the factory, have a great productive day, and get back in time to pick her up, which is really cool for anybody who's been overseas or done manufacturing or travel. So, not only the convenience, not only being able to work more closely with the team, and I'm sure we'll get into this a little bit more, there are some tariff, financial, business, timing, logistics, cash flow impacts on all of those things that are all net positives for our US customers by moving closer to home.
Yeah, I think it is closer for me to go to your factory right now than to home for me in North County, San Diego.
Right.
For real.
Yeah.
Not even regardless of traffic.
Right.
Which has changed over time. Angel, you've been doing this for nearly 20 years. What was it like from then? Now, what trends have you seen that are helping the friendshoring movement?
Well, back then there were not even any buzzwords. No one was talking about bringing this type of level of engineering to Mexico. Back then, it was just pure manufacturing. So you just acquire a bunch of equipment and set up processes, and it was basically mostly like cost efficient providing. And then when we started, we tried to promote here in the area, and we were asked like, do you really have a computer degrees or anything like that? At some point, we were even asked, do you own laptops or computers? We're like, damn, it's close as you just mentioned. And back then, you can cross the border without actually proving that you were a U.S. citizen or you have a visa. It was so easy. But still, people didn't believe in our talent. So it was hard for us to prove that, yeah, the Mexican and Latin American talent can deliver, especially in this area. And that started being a trend in the very few individuals that believe in doing so, and like they found a gold mine. Hey, I don't want to talk to anyone about this because these people are so good that they want to hire all of them. And back then we were the only ones that, hey, you need to hire people, you need to train people, because it's not just what they learn in the university. We need to invest at some point up to 24 months in order to get people ready. So imagine the turnaround that we needed to have, and if people were leaving the company 2.5 years, 3.5 years, was damn, all of this investment. So we started doing it. So we were starting getting people like 5-6 years into it, and we didn't have anyone outside Tijuana. And then within Mexico, most of the people that know Mexico, there's always this bad media about Tijuana specifically, like you're gonna get kidnapped or whatever. We all heard what happened last week. And we were inviting Mexicans to come to Tijuana, and they were afraid to come to Tijuana co-nationals, and it was tough on both sides. We were stubborn, resilient, whatever you want to call it, to keep doing it. And so, like, now Mexico passed Canada and the trade with the U.S. because of a lot of the nearshoring that is going on, manufacturing still, etc. But yeah, it was hard, and now everyone is looking at the potential. I every single time that I have the opportunity to promote that, hire at least 20 or 30% of your workforce, and you will see not just the increment of productivity, but how can that shift of mentality can exponentially grow your business, because it's a different way of thought. And of course, keep leading the way you do your business, but keep adding these other nationalities that we want to prove that we can deliver in any area. So that's what.
We'll come back a bit to kind of this labor arbitrage aspect, which is what I think a lot of people think of when they think of outsourcing technology, whether it's development, something like that. Ernesto, Tecma has been building technology for a long time, and I think a lot of people think of automotive and TVs, but what trends have you seen over time from a manufacturing design factories for manufacturing over time?
The one trend I think over the past almost 40 years that's been constant and constantly upwards is the degree of hiring and talent that we're hiring that is not just a direct operator, somebody working directly on the production line, which is what it was 40 years ago to some degree. But nowadays, roughly 30 to 40%, depending on the specific nature of the factory, of the staff can actually be engineers, supervision, technicians, so much higher level talent than what it used to be. Nowadays in Tijuana alone, there's almost 250,000 employees in manufacturing in EMEX, so maquiladora manufacturing. It's a historically high number, and a very significant portion of those are engineers. Fortunately, Tijuana invested a long time ago in education systems to target or to design programs and design and develop talent that can work in the factories at an engineering level, a product development level. SEACOMP is actually a great example of this because of the latest, the forefront of technology and that's being manufactured in Tijuana, where you're not just building components, you're not just building this one part that will be sent to Asia or to the US to be finished. You're building finished product, you're engineering part of that finished product. And so it's really exciting to see. It's exciting to see how much of an economic and just a personal impact it's had for people. And for the people in Tijuana especially. So
why don't we build off of that? So you're opening tomorrow, but this for SEACOMP, this didn't happen overnight.
Right.
Can you take us back through when a company like yours decides to open a second facility? How what were some of the ingredients that went into, and where did you go through to first start looking, deciding that where the talent is, and what are the needs, the recipe to go into that?
There's one very clear trigger, the tariffs from 2018. Most of the electronic products that we make suddenly had a 25% additional import duty on them coming into the U.S. And most of our business at SEACOMP is U.S.-based customers. And even some customers that we have in Europe, their markets are in the U.S. So even if they're not directly a U.S.-based client, they're shipping product into the U.S. So the 2018 tariffs were really the kickoff to the conversation. So Mike and Francois, a couple of the guys in the audience here, they started looking around because a lot of our customers were asking for a China plus one option. So it wasn't necessarily we have to get out of China, but we need to start looking at options that we might have to avoid these tariffs. Probably the tariffs are going to go away soon, but just in case, that has not happened. Tariffs are still here, so that really accelerated. So we started looking all over Southeast Asia. We had a presence in Hong Kong. Mike, the owner of the company, was there. We had operations, sourcing, procurement. We had a real healthy team there. So if we can find somewhere in the neighborhood, then that makes a lot of sense. We could make that work pretty easily and still get around the tariffs. Well, then COVID hit. So COVID prevented travel. So when we were originally thinking, we'll start in China, we'll transfer, we'll send a SWAT team over we ended up selecting the Philippines. We looked at Thailand, Malaysia, Vietnam, Taiwan, right? We looked at a lot of different countries. We were going to go with the Philippines, and we figured we'd send a SWAT team over, do some training, right? Jump back and forth, and that got blown up. So that ended up leading to Mike, the owner, moving back from Hong Kong back to San Diego, which set into motion finance team and operations and everybody coming to our Carlsbad global headquarters, and then Tijuana being the very obvious choice for that China plus one. So 2018 till now, till tomorrow, I guess is the process.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Gabby, take us through maybe some of the due diligence that companies come to you for help, and just navigating this multi-year path to establishing a physical presence.
Yeah, so it's interesting. As it pertains from due diligence to SEACOMP's path, I have to back out a little bit about and set the stage more of trade compliance, because I don't know how many of you, like by show of hand, how many of you have even heard of trade compliance? Probably like less than half, yeah. So
that was all our people.
Yeah, I know. So hopefully all the SEACOMP folks raise their hand. So with trade compliance, there's tangibles you have to consider and intangibles. So I want to kind of back up and answer your question in a little bit of a roundabout way. So from a tangible perspective, that's the obvious stuff for SEACOMP. That is your classification. You mentioned tariff. I think you said tariffs are going away. They're here to stay. Yeah. The 25%, I hope that was a joke.
It was.
Yeah, we live and breathe this stuff, and they're here to stay. So your tariff classification, your actual tangible item, what you can touch and see, has a tariff number. That drives your duty rate. That drives whether you're subject to the China tariffs, whether you're subject to a whole host of other government agency considerations. There's anti-dumping duties. It's your landed cost. That's ultimately what's driving your landed cost. So from SEACOMP, to back out and answer your question from 2018 moving forward, it's not only what's the classification and the rollout of specifically the China tariffs is like, it's 7.5, no, it's 25, no, it's 7.5, but it's only 7.5 for X amount. So that I want to kind of put in a box and not discuss, because the larger concept is that the tangible tariff classification drives the duty rate, drives all the other decisions. But the intangible is what I've really been drilling into Terry and the SEACOMP team, and that's your recipe, because that's the message that I have for anybody involved in any cross-border manufacturing of any sort, is your product that you're manufacturing, the recipe, your secret sauce that you're handing over to be manufactured can sometimes have some ramifications and some licensable information that is protected for national security reasons, for nuclear proliferation reasons, for chemical and weapon. And so that's where, in terms of the roadmap of SEACOMP, every client that SEACOMP has introduced me to, we do the tariff classification to figure out the tangible risk, but we do the intangible work as well. Great, you want to manufacture in Mexico? What if all your Mexican nationals working on this in Mexico now need licenses from the US government to do that? So those are things that are imperative to identify as upstream as possible. So we've luckily been together on this journey over a few years, and SEACOMP they got it dialed in. So it's been great, but that's my message.
It's helpful.
And dialed in means we introduce customers to Gabby a lot because we can only provide so much guidance. And if we're wrong telling a customer and they take our word for it, and we, it's still they're on the hook.
Yeah.
Or the penalties, right? So we go.
Our president is here tonight.
Let me introduce you.
She and I were on one of my earliest sales calls. I've been at the company 7 years, and one of our earliest calls was with a robotics manufacturer. And the president on the phone, he's like, "You're telling me that everybody does this, like tariff classification? Like, no, this is BS. This is not something that everybody does." He's like, "It's like speeding on the highway. Everybody does it, but it just like really sucks for the one guy who gets caught." I'm like, "Well, I mean, I'm compliant, so you want to be the one who gets caught, go for it." But we did not land that client. It was, I don't know. His company shut down. It's no longer.
I said they may still come back.
Yeah.
You can always suggest to go into software, and you can avoid all of that.
Don't get me started on recipes, man. It's like,
Angel, why don't you take us through a little bit of the consideration of working with companies? What kind of questions come up, and what do they not ask that you tend to have to bring up from working on a software side?
Okay, for software, first, you wanted to leave all your liabilities in the U.S. So make sure that you're making business with a U.S. legal entity. And to some extent, I have come to realization that it's pretty easy to any foreign citizen to set up a business, and then it's not properly backed up. So make sure that the structure and everything is legally formed in the U.S. and it's backed up correctly. For us, for example, we always provide an insurance policy for liabilities. It depends on the size of the business that we're going to work, etc. But that's something that you want to take into consideration. And the data, it covers everything and everyone working related to this business, right? Because there's some times where people hire people from Ukraine or wherever they are in the world, and those are not covered by what they offer here in the States. So it's a different country, so as long as you're covered here, you're good on that end. Security and every other thing, it's like everything is on the cloud. So there's no need, for example, for any of our developers to download your code. It's just the piece of code that they're working on and that's specific. So it's fairly simple to set up all the infrastructure, cloud-based, AWS, Google, Microsoft, whatever it is, or even if some customers still have their own. It's easy just to give access and to set up all your security on your side, so you can monitor who is downloading what, uploading what, etc. At every single time. Everything is automated now, testing even. So it's fairly simple to protect your IP. And again, if the company that you're doing business with is giving you the legal framework to cover all of that, that's pretty much it. I'm more worried about how can you make sure that the talent is going to perform, right? Because sometimes it's their training, their experience, but sometimes it's the way you work. So it's not easy to adapt to all type of projects. The complexity is different, setup is different. We have worked with companies that have people in 5 or 6 different countries. At the end of 6 months, normally we are the ones managing all of them, because we know how to make this process work. So again, it's not just hiring talent and having the right people, but it's making sure they have the managers to actually deliver it. Normally, I'm more worried on the initial 3 to 6 months on that end than the legal and the security compliance, which is important. But since we know how to deal with it, it's more like, let's be productive to show that this is something that will work for the long run. Our tenure with customers is around 5-6 years. And normally we deliver 2-3 different successful products, growth, etc., that most of them become acquired. And our take is like, hey, after acquisition, we want to take in business with the acquired company. And that has been the case, luckily for us.
Can you just speak to a little bit more about the broadness of your talent? I mean, your software, I think you started in a specific area, maybe apps, but it has grown significantly, which has forced you to find talent in different regions as well. Speak a little bit to that part too.
Yeah, at first we were working with only small businesses, companies that hired 3 to 5 people mostly. And then as they were growing and we were growing, we started working with companies needing 15 to 20. So Tijuana wasn't enough. And by 2018, we started our second office back in Monterrey. Actually, Humberto's here. He was the one setting up the second facilities. And we thought that we were going to hire like 30 people or so in a year, and we grew like to 100. And then pandemic came, and we opened our third and fourth facilities, Aguascalientes and Colima, two border town cities to Guadalajara, which is the third largest city within Mexico. 2021, 2022, we needed to expand into South America. We're about to open our fifth office in Medellin in Colombia, which is pretty cool. We can have a lot of fun there. And that's Latin America. But the cool thing, and what make us decide to be Medellin, we were able to spot like 5 individuals, very, very smart. First interview, assigned some work, and they were high-level people. So we thought, this is it. This is it. You can have the best of South America just landing in Medellin. So now we have access to a larger pool of talent. So we were challenged to hire 150 people within 6 months, and we delivered like within 5, because we had access to all of those different markets, and we're still developing people and bringing people more to work in the U.S.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah.
Ernesto, I'm going to turn to you just to also talk about talent. You mentioned kind of a little bit of the change of talent over time, of being able to do more complex kind of nature. Anything else, considerations-wise, that's unique maybe to the border versus other parts that's driving where Tecma is expanding to as well too, or certain clients coming to you?
You know, the one common question that I think a lot of companies are going to Mexico for is not necessarily the cost, not necessarily the level of education or the inherent talent in the person, but it's just availability. So one of the questions that just about everyone asks is, you know, I'm going to need to hire 30, 40, 50 people in a month. Can we do that? And they're going to be engineers, they're going to be operators, supervisors, everything across the board to literally start from scratch, right? You build a factory, you build all the tenant improvements, you bring your equipment, and then you got to hire people. And so I think by far the most common question from all of our clients, especially when they're just starting out to look at the operation, to consider the operation in Mexico, is, can I get the people? And it doesn't matter whether they're coming from Asia, from California, from Europe, from Michigan, across the board, the first thing they tell us is we can't find people, or they don't want to stay, or they don't want to work in manufacturing. And so Tijuana especially, and really across the border, Juarez, Tijuana, Monterrey, we have the advantage that people in Mexico across all of the country know that there are jobs in these cities. So that attracts a lot of migration. Tijuana, it's estimated that we get about 50 to 100,000 people coming from southern Mexico every year. And so that provides a huge pool of talent. And it's not just the jobs, but also the aspect of it where you can actually get an education and develop a career in these factories that attracts people. And it's really one of the really great aspects of what we do.
Amazing. Kind of open to everyone, but a little bit of the cultural considerations. What do American companies run into that they didn't expect, and vice versa? Kind of anything that you've seen in companies work on both sides?
I can start. Nowadays, we're actually getting companies from all over the world. We always have, but it's more prominent now where we've just 3 years ago, we signed our first Chinese client. So we actually have a company from China who needs to manufacture locally for the North American market. And so we have seen a lot of that, and the cultural aspects of it. Number one is that you need to keep in mind is just about it. Look, just like anywhere else, respect for people, for the workers, no matter who it is or what level of worker it is. You have to show respect, and that's especially important when you have a foreign management, which about half of our client factories have foreign management. The other half have local management, which is also a change and a shift over the years. But definitely respect for the individuals is critical. And different cultures have different definitions of respect. And so you do have to acclimate and maybe apply the local customs to how you respect people. But that's critical. And the other one is don't leave your common sense at the border. Right, so you're running a factory. You've run factories all over the world in some of our clients' cases, and the same things that apply in China or in Europe or in the U.S. Apply here too for manufacturing. There are nuances, obviously, and there's legal aspects to it, and that's what we're there to help our clients with. But overall, don't think of it as something that's very different. It's manufacturing. And the fundamentals are the same. So.
That's great. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
There, you want to?
Sure. And I think it's a great answer for us. We're here in Carlsbad. We have a factory in China. We have a team in Hong Kong. A couple of our guys are here from London and Sweden, and now we're opening Mexico. So we always kind of joke, somebody's always on holiday, right? So that's part of the challenge. So yes, respect, I would say we start with, and then communication for what we do is kind of the number one thing. Whether even if we're just working with, in English in California with American customers, the communication for really complex projects is really, really critical. And you add in the additional language, challenges, you add in the time zones, you kind of add in all the different layers, and that communication is really, really challenging, and it is still the very most important thing to be able to execute a product, right? A project. And so, I think figuring out how to be, how to speak and write in a way that's understandable, and also how to set up projects and handoff points between teams that are also very clear, right? So not just having hey, I hope this is good enough, right? Having, kind of defined checkpoints. Everybody knows what good is or what done is before you're handing it off is really key.
Let me turn a question over a little bit with using my investor hat. As investors, we get pitches often on companies who everyone's got to have an edge to catch up to the enterprise company, right, of some sort. Whether it's we have an outsourced dev team in some place in the world, so therefore, our cost or our monthly burn is less, or we can build technology differently. Gabby, we were kind of talking this ahead of time. Like, what do investors come to you with questions of how to understand a startup or a later stage company? With how do you do diligence on a company with a multinational talent force like this?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. So the funds that we work with, or I should say, kind of give input to, come to us because they've been burned or trained properly to understand the upstream importance, which I mentioned earlier, which is, okay, this company wants to make an interactive yoga meditation ball that I'm going to hold and it's going to vibrate when, but it's out of wood and this component comes from China, and is it realistic that this is going to be manufactured over here and their landed cost needs to be X, Y, and Z? So they might bounce off ideas from us to say, okay, this is what this is looking like, and this is, what this product is, and this is what the cost of the product is going to be. Let's back out and again, back to the landed cost component and understanding. Back to my tangibles and intangibles. The tangible is the tariff classifications, the duty rates, your landed costs. Is it going to hit the section tariffs? Is it going to hit any anti-dumping? Your intangibles is the manufacturing of this. If I am investing in this company that's now going to require all these software engineers to work on it from Mexico or from Vietnam or from the Philippines, am I going to need licenses from the United States to pass the recipe, the information for the development and production of that item to... So, what am I in for, kind of from a supply chain standpoint? So this is all information, again, that whether you're a VC or you're running your own company or whomever, just build the process. When we're talking about diligence or systems, what do you need to do? There's no off-the-shelf system. It's just embedding it into your process. Build it into your NPI, your new product introduction. Build it into your customer vetting, your customer onboarding. Just think about your own respective business and what's the point of origin. Because I tell you, I've been in my industry for 20 years and nobody knew what I did even in companies that I worked for until those tariffs went into effect. They're like, oh, I get it. That's important. Here's some headcount. So it's just vet it upstream. And from an investor standpoint, it's just really understand what you're investing in and what the ramifications are going to be from the more compliance, the boring stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd ask a similar question to you, Angel, because you get pitched a lot. A lot of software ideas seem so easy. What considerations do you have to go through to decide to invest? And you're investing your talent pool, right? You're to go and take this project on.
Yeah, so whenever there's a nearshoring component on the formula of that company, it's very appealing to us. We've started seeing a lot of our customers become successfully selling their companies. So that's how we're trying to investing ourselves into some of the companies that give us the opportunity to invest in their own companies that work for us. So far we have done like 8 different deals besides the ones that we have done through Interlock or those stuff, PC and other investment firms. So what we have seen is that when you have that component, you deliver faster. You basically take products to market faster, which improves your ROI a lot. You can improve by working directly with customers. We have been assigned to specific customers like, hey, this is going to be your beta version. So you keep improving the product for maybe 6 months into it after delivering. So that helps a lot to really create a good product market fit. We have also been part of not only, sometimes we start just boring stuff, maintenance, that kind of stuff, but that help us to learn the business side of it. So it's critical to understand how these guys are making business. So whenever we jump into the core, the cool stuff, we have that chip also aligned. And that's most of the things that we look at and the formula. And of course, if they have a successful business development area, if they're attending a massive market, if it's B2B, if the companies that are going after are in a great spot, depending on the economy, etc. And if that's the case, it's a no-brainer.
This wouldn't be a panel in 2024 without talking about AI. So we got to bring it up. What technologies are like helping move forward this friendshoring movement? Anything coming to mind? I'll let any of you all jump in on this.
To start in software, before moving into hardware, it's all LLMs are improving. I was talking to Lena a little bit ago, and developers are telling that right now they're improving 20 to 30% performance, and I'm pretty sure that they're the ones holding it to 20, 30% improvement. I'm pretty sure whenever they keep doing it as a regular thing using that technology, their productivity will increase 200%, 300%. That's what I have seen, that it's doable. Some people have said that today I'm improving 10 times what I'm doing like a year ago. Still, it depends on the project type and the team composition and everything, but 200, 300%, I think it's doable with the technologies that are coming. And still, we don't have the latest version that it's about to come. So it's a lot of transformation in the industry in the near future, but for good. For good. It's going to mean better, bigger, larger business for everyone.
Anything to your respective industries?
Yeah, I would say from a regulatory perspective, as we see in the news, the government's still trying to figure out how to actually codify and regulate the AI space as a whole. Specifically in the trade compliance world, it has been regulated and codified very specifically in more geospatial imagery, so it's hyper niche. However, the White House does have a list of the emerging technologies, which is everything that robotics, biotech, like anything that we would kind of categorize as AI. And there's a lot of movement in Congress and nothing kind of coming down the pike, so to speak, in terms of any AI that we would see on the ground. We have a lot of clients who are in the AI space, and it's like right now it's not too regulated. But from a trade compliance, and that's more in the kind of intangible world of what's coming down the pike, but tangibly, it's what we do is so hyper nuanced from the tangible world of assigning the tariff classifications, doing all the work to figure out the duty rates, that there's a few companies out there that are trying to develop AI solutions to do this. And we're very much actively involved in helping them support this. And it's interesting to watch, but nothing really to point to right now. Just kind of watching the government figure it out and watching whatever administration will shake out on both sides. It's certainly a few years down the line, I'd say.
Okay. Anything, Ernesto, you would like to add?
Well, our experience with AI has been interesting because what we've seen is the Mexican government agencies in Mexico have actually been using AI to perform audits, and so the audit activity has increased substantially over the past year, 2 years, and we know they're implementing AI into their audits, and so that makes our job, all the more important in terms of making sure that we help our clients to stay within the compliance parameters, and that includes in everything in customs or taxes, which are the two areas where they're mostly focused. So,
Really?
And we are also in the early stages of implementing the technology to help us as well in the compliance aspect. So.
I'm going to ask, what are they audited? You said customs, so it's like tariffs?
Inventories and exports and that type of thing, yeah.
And on
HTS
retroactive
codes.
shipments or active?
No, retroactive.
Yeah.
And taxes also, a lot of taxes.
Yeah.
We're about to turn it over to the audience for questions. So if we have a microphone, let's get the handheld mic up, and I'm happy to walk it out, or if Sarah wants to. Awesome, thank you. Let's give our panel a round of applause real quick. Questions from the audience, please.
I'll take.
Hi, everyone. Well, thanks, amazing panelists. Thanks, Neal, for bringing this together. I think it was really important. So, I don't know, questions. I've tried to limit it to 2, if that's okay. I had so many. But first is kind of like with the whole NAFTA deal. I feel like, and you guys, some of you have been in this industry for so long. Have you seen really the big improvement? I feel like you see it in the news, but it's what is really the magical numbers behind there? And then second question, I guess, is kind of the add-on, and that's mainly because I recently relocated to South America. There's talks about adding Uruguay to NAFTA. What is your feeling? A, have you heard about it? And B, what is your feeling how that even accelerates this magical bi-national nation we have here?
I can definitely take that one. So first of all, it's not NAFTA anymore. So you know enough about it. I call it new NAFTA because we've been around, and I'm sure, NAFTA, it's only been around since the 90s, I feel like. So it's the USMCA, the US-Mexico-Canada agreement, and I don't know if there's, by just quick context, it's a free trade agreement between the US, Canada, and Mexico. And it is a very specific agreement. So I would say one thing that I did not touch on that plays directly into NAFTA and USMCA is qualification of goods to leverage this duty-free treatment. So again, going back to the tangible, you classify your goods, that classification drives whether your product is actually going to be eligible for that program. And the numbers coming out of that program are huge in terms of the duty savings that companies use. I know when I worked in-house in my past company, we were saving the company $2 to $5 million a year on free trade agreements in general, NAFTA being one of them back then. USMCA, in the aftermath of the Section 301 from China, has been a little trickier, and I don't know if you guys have been seeing this specifically in Mexico, because one thing that previously goods, there's kind of 3 ways to qualify goods for the USMCA program when it's occurring in Mexico. One of those is obviously goods wholly of origin. There's goods made within the territories, but the third is the most common, which is kind of what we're here to talk about today. It's when you're importing goods from various locations in the world into Mexico, manufacturing a finished good. Is it a country of origin in Mexico? Is the $1 million question, quite literally, in most of my clients' cases. And unfortunately, in the Section 301 aftermath, a good can qualify for USMCA, but not get out of the section tariffs. So it's been this wild world in the past few years where the companies, our clients who were saving millions in NAFTA, USMCA before, in the aftermath of USMCA and CBP, Customs and Border Protection's really subjective treatment of kind of how goods are qualified under Section 301, they're losing those tariff treatments. So in short, the USMCA trade agreement is great. It's a really well-written agreement. It, from the consumer hardware device standpoint, is very encompassing. So it's not really stringent in this space. In the retail space, it's really tight and hard to leverage. In the food space, it's hard. But to this audience, it's a very friendly agreement for the consumer hardware space. But it's just that Section 301 factor. So it's really about analyzing what you're manufacturing into a finished product to determine whether it would qualify, so you can leverage all of those benefits.
Yep.
Thank you.
From our perspective, very quickly, just a comment, but because we were around before NAFTA, so we started in the mid-'80s, and we've seen how the geopolitical aspects of trade agreements really do have an impact, considerable impact on employment and investment into Mexico. And as an example, in 2001, when China entered the WTO, we saw a significant impact on investment and jobs in Mexico, not just in the US, but in Mexico. Both countries were pretty impacted in terms of a reduction in investment and jobs. And then since 2008 and that recession, Lehman and all that, since then it's all been kind of an uptrend and an acceleration with COVID and an acceleration, but it's been on an uptick for many years now. USMCA, by providing that level of certainty, especially during the Trump administration, did resolve, I think, a lot and added to that level of certainty for companies to be able to invest. And so we're seeing that trend continue.
Yeah, thanks for adding that. I think that's a really interesting fact, kind of like, like once you have the standards between the nations, like more established, like investment flows, like easier to like navigate, I guess.
Yep.
We have another question in the back.
It's me? Okay. Hi, everyone. My name's Miles. I'm coming from a manufacturing perspective here in San Diego. And I wanted to hear a bit more about this like labor arbitrage. I like the way you put that, Neal. And the benefits, differentiators that factories in Mexico would have. A lot of the times I work with clients and we're getting to a larger scale. And it's like, we go to China for some reasons. And I'd love to tell them a story about why to go to Mexico, how to pursue Mexico. And is it just the labor arbitrage, or are there new technologies, robotics, automation that like you're seeing that you're proud of? Speak to that.
Yeah, I'll take it. Why Mexico instead of China if you're trying to scale manufacturing? Getting around the tariff, just to wrap that conversation up, right? So if you've got a product that is coming in from China at a 25% landed tariff, the comparison to make the finished good in Mexico, just product to product, forget the tariff, forget freight, forget everything else. The product, what we've seen in all of our averages, about 15 to 18% higher cost to make a finished product in Mexico. Electronics, the types of things we do, right? So about 15 to 18% higher cost, but then you're 2 days trucking away from your warehouse, your distribution center, from your customer. You don't have the tariff. You've got this lovely USMCA free trade agreement, so there is no import duty. As long as you've qualified for the substantial transformation that it takes to achieve the country of origin designation for Mexico, right? And typically in the electronics world, everything that we make, you pretty much have to do the circuit board assembly. So the surface mount of the components onto the circuit board is really where most of the component dollar value is added, which is not the only thing I've learned from you. But where the product gets most of its character, right, is in the PCBA. When you put some plastics around it, maybe some accessories in a box and all that, still the core value of that transformation comes from the electronics piece. So as long as you're doing that, you qualify for the substantial transformation, 15 to 18% higher cost, but you're close to market. Cash flows faster. You're not sitting on the water in China or from China for 4 to 6 weeks. If you have to air freight, which I know there's people in this room that pay a good amount for air freight, that can be really, really expensive in terms of your total COGS. There's very good reasons from a financial standpoint for a total landed cost of a product to go to Mexico. For a lot of the engineers and product developers that are in this room like you, if you run into a problem, again, you can be there, you can work with a team, you can get hands-on, you can troubleshoot. So the time to solve problems is much faster, right? So the convenience of working in the same time zone, the free trade agreements, like we've mentioned, the general cooperation between governments, maybe at a really high level, is much higher here than obviously I think any of us would assume between US and China. IP considerations and security and travel, and like you can go down the list of all the things that we get asked about all the time. So does that cover it?
You know, like from a A to B services, I understand there's so much more to the equation. And maybe flipping it, it's sometimes nice to know, is there a situation in which China is just, sorry, I'm taking the mic again.
Yep.
Is there a situation in which China is a slam dunk? It's nice to know what the other side of the argument is.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And just so everybody's clear, we SEACOMP are agnostic in terms of where our customers would like us to build their product, whether it's China or Mexico. We're not pushing either. We offer both, right? So China, in terms of high volume, in terms of if you don't have a stable forecast, if you suddenly need to ramp and be really high for a couple of months and then go back down, China's flexibility and responsiveness to be able to do that sort of thing is absolutely incredible, right? So a lot of people think China is, it's just cheap and it's low quality. In the electronics world, that Shenzhen, Dongguan, Guangzhou, that region is the electronics manufacturing capital of the world. There is more talent and skill and experience there. Within 10 miles of our China factory, every component's available. The level of expertise and passion from the people to make things in a great way, fast, efficient, low cost, is unmatched anywhere in the world. So there's some very good reasons. If you have a product that does not have a tariff, or if you have a product that has a smaller tariff, and you have really high volumes, or you need some flexibility, China may be a better option for that.
Yeah. So I think you had a question behind you.
Hi, Miles. This is kind of to go along with what Miles said. One, I lived through the 301 tariffs. It was a total nightmare. So, A, are there tariffs on components coming in? Because the components are still going to come in from China, so I was curious on that. Also, two, does Mexico have certain environmental, where there are certain materials and things that you cannot work with in Mexico that you can work with in China? And three, is SEACOMP going to do most of the, if you're going to use an ODM type service, are you going to still do that in China and then bring it over to Mexico? And so the engineering development work is going to still reside in China with the talent pool? Or is that also going to be part of the SEACOMP local factory?
I guess I'll take that one.
I think so.
It's more specific.
What was the first part?
Materials.
Components.
On components.
Tariffs on components. Thank you. Sorry. So generally, we are going to, a lot of the components are coming out of China. We're going to buy them, kit them, and send them into LA Long Beach port most often. They are going to be trucked in bond down to Mexico. So they technically don't land in the US and trigger the tariff, right? So they are bonded. They will come down to Mexico. We will import. We have a facility there under Tecma. So we'll import into Mexico. We will perform the substantial transformation, and then the finished good that's being imported from Mexico back into the US now has a tariff classification that is not on the country of origin China 301 list. So that's where the benefit is for the whole trade agreement. The second part I don't exactly know on the chemicals or what things there might be.
I'm thinking plastic injection molding. Are there certain things that cannot be done in Mexico, just from certain environmental China?
I would imagine there are, and maybe some other people have some. I'll take number 3, and then I'll pass it. And if nobody up here answers, there's people in the room that we could probably introduce you to. The third part for engineering and product development, anything that we SEACOMP are developing or engineering for a customer on behalf of a customer is done out of our Carlsbad location. So any product creation, IP creation is done locally and then sent out to be manufactured in either location. We've done some work where we have existing customers that have been manufacturing in China that will be transferring for tariff reasons or other reasons into Mexico. There are other programs that we have during this transition period that it's taken quite a while, right? So the demand for facilities in Mexico, Ernesto could talk much more about, but it took us quite a while to find a space. We looked at a lot of spaces. We ended up going much larger than we originally thought, which is fortunate we did because we're filling it. But the demand for space was really high there. So we were doing NPI in China with our team, with our existing policies, procedures, experts, and all that over there while we were preparing Mexico for transfer. But generally, I think the goal going forward in the next phase after Mexico is fully running, then we will just start, if it's going to be a Mexico-made product, we will start NPI and everything else here locally. If it's going to be a China-made product, they will handle it from scratch.
Interesting. Maybe one more question and we'll wrap it up from there? Yeah. Let's grab a mic real quick.
This prevents fully transferring production to Tijuana. You've been expanding on how the differences between China and Mexico have differences. What is preventing you guys from fully transferring to Mexico?
We've had a very successful run in China. We've got a great team in China. We are still, again, like I mentioned, it's the electronics manufacturing capital of the world, where there are a lot of customers that either don't have tariffs or have global distribution. So some companies that, maybe half their business might be in the US, half might be elsewhere. So manufacturing in China, and doing the total cost of ownership for everywhere you're shipping, the math still might make sense to manufacture in China. And like I said, we've got a great team of great people there that we're really, really proud of, right? So we're not running away from China. We're adding Mexico as an option to fulfill customer demand.
Creating your operations from scratch, say like in the next 3 years, you reconsider just as a complete.
If we were new, we wouldn't do 2 factories at once. That's that's for sure. Hard to answer a hypothetical. Yeah. Sure.
Pick.
Yeah, so as I'm going through the process, we've been in China for 20 years, okay? And as I'm going through this process, as we're moving most of our manufacturing to Mexico, the opportunity for co-location and a blended solution provides a lot of flexibility in the supply chain, okay? And so I'm looking at maybe we still do some orders in China, but the ability and speed at which we can move our products in to the U.S. from Mexico solves a lot of the logistic issues. And I look internationally at, coming into Long Beach is a bottleneck, the Panama Canal is a disaster, the ships that are going to fit aren't going to fit in the near future. And as we look at even, the efficiency of vehicles and emission restrictions and some of those things, having that flexibility and co-location is key to the solution as we go forward. Yeah. And I have one more question. Yeah. Kind of back to the people piece.
Bill?
I did a project in Mexico in '92, and we really fought with, housing, medical, daycare, the logistics, so how's the infrastructure now as we're moving, I hear 250,000 people coming to Mexico. I know back then that was a huge challenge, and we were having to help, as a company, we had doctors in-house, daycare in-house, all of those things. So I'd just like to hear how that's improved and what the plan going forward, because, as it surges, obviously housing and healthcare is going to be a big issue.
There's a lot of factors in your question, but I'll touch on daycare. Specifically, daycare, the infrastructure is pretty good because there's a private sector that's evolved that the government subsidizes, and so daycare is actually pretty available, especially in the manufacturing world. And there are industrial parks and sections of the city in Tijuana specifically where there's actually daycare centers attached to the industrial park, and then some of the larger manufacturers might have a daycare center within their facility. With regard to medical care, that's a challenge. It's a challenge because of the growth, but it's also a challenge because of the way the federal government's managed some things and how they manage things, and the budgets and budget cuts that we've seen in the last 4 or 5 years. And so that's had a significant impact on healthcare delivery too, because everyone who works in a maquiladora, in a factory, if they're formal employees, which I think probably the maquiladora industry in Mexico is one of the most compliant industries in Mexico, where 100% of the employees are on formal payroll with pay taxes and everything and have medical care. In Mexico in general, it's only about 40 to 50% of people that work are in formal jobs. So that the medical system, especially the public one, is definitely strained. It has been always, and back then it was. But it continues to be. It's getting better, and there are private sector aspects that also come into play now, and that some companies are able to subsidize, and so that's a help for employees. Pharmacies now have doctors, a lot of them attached to the pharmacy. So the private sector, in many ways, is trying to overcome a lot of these challenges. We have infrastructure challenges in Tijuana and across Mexico, especially with electrical. Private sector is addressing that challenge. Some of the new industrial parks are more expensive, but they are building their own substations for distribution, for pulling power into the factories. So fortunately, the private sector is able to address a lot of those concerns. It's not perfect, but there's definitely been an improvement over the last 20, 30 years. Yeah.
One last one.
Derek Jackson here from SEACOMP. First off, thanks for your time and the experience and wisdom shared with us this evening. Really appreciate it. My question is for Ernesto. So you've had the privilege of setting up manufacturing facilities across a broad number of industries in Mexico. And you talked a little bit about the culture and the respect piece of the importance of that when setting up a manufacturing operation. But if you look at all these manufacturing operations that you've set up, what have they done to make their business as successful as possible, manufacturing in Mexico? If you had to pick a few variables, because we have a lot of folks here who are going to be traveling down to see the SEACOMP Mexico facility tomorrow, and it's something that we're trying to get as right as possible because we take that very seriously at SEACOMP. So I'd be curious, with your expertise and experience, what you've seen and what we could do best to have a successful operation there.
Good question, Derek. And actually, the answer is, I'm sure I've mentioned it to Terry and Mike early on, but it's culture. It's not treating your factory in Mexico because it happens to be under Tecma. We're make your employees feel like they are SEACOMP employees, and we help you with that, obviously. But that's critical. Bringing your culture that you have here in Carlsbad and in China and anywhere else that you have a SEACOMP office. I think Terry was mentioning you have people here from Switzerland or
London and Sweden.
Yeah, thank you. And so that culture, bring it to your factory. Make your people feel like they're part of your family, and I think that's going to go a long way to making it successful for sure.
Angel, I think you can speak to that a little bit. I've walked through your facility and seen the startup shirts. Like the team is the team here. You speak a little bit about
they become an extension of our customers, and they live like we started doing an annual gathering 6 years ago. We go different location. This year is going to be Puerto Vallarta, but one of our customers got that for their own, and they invite all of our people, and everyone is all together. Like you don't have to treat them like they're part of your company. They're your company. So that creates this purpose, higher level of commitment to your own objectives, goals, etc. And they work like that, and it works very, very well. So yeah, that's a must for us.
That's great. Well, I think our panelists will stay for a little bit, and so feel free to come up and talk to them if you guys will stay for a little bit. Appreciate that. If you've enjoyed this conversation and want to engage with this community more on both sides of the border, I will say there's a lot of events happening. Like just last weekend, ArkusNexus hosted a 2-day SD hackathon, right? SDX hackathon. And tomorrow night, while some of us will be at the ribbon cutting, another group will be going down to get to know Techstars San Diego, hosting an event also in Tijuana too. And then later in the month, TechCon SoCal will be putting on a conference, one-day conference on May 24th, where really you'll have from the entire continent, from New York, Mexico, and everything in between, coming down and having a conversation about what is the future of technology, both software and hardware. I know Terry is hosting the future of hardware conversation. And so please engage with us, and let's keep the conversation going, and let's collaborate more as much as we can, and enjoy tonight. We'll see you all tomorrow. So thank you all very much.